The family dinner happened just the way it always did. The house was big and bright, and the long wooden table was full of food. There was roast beef, mashed potatoes, green beans, and warm bread with butter. Everything looked perfect. But the smiles around the table were not very warm. They were tight smiles, the kind people use when they are judging you. Uncle Theron sat at the head of the table. He talked and talked about how the housing market was going down and how smart people were being very careful with their money. He cut into his steak and shook his head like the whole world needed his advice. Aunt Seraphine sat next to him, pouring red wine into everyone's glass, even when they had not finished the first one. Across from me sat my cousin Cale. He had gel in his hair and wore a shiny watch that he kept showing by moving his hand around. He would not stop talking about his new job at a big bank. Another shaky quarter, Uncle Theron said while chewing. Good thing we stick to safe investments. Right, Cale? Cale smiled proudly. Of course. Blue chip stocks. City bonds. Safe funds. Slow and steady wins the race. Then he looked at me with a smirk. Not like some people and their digital gambling. I smiled politely. I picked up my glass of sparkling water and took a small sip. My throat felt tight, but I kept my face calm. I did not say anything. My lawyer's emails from earlier that day were still in my mind. Tomorrow was going to be a very big day. But tonight I let them talk. I still don't understand why you wasted your inheritance, Selara, Aunt Seraphine said, shaking her head. Your grandfather worked so hard to leave you something important. 6 years ago, Grandpa Alaric had given each grandchild $150,000. I remembered the day clearly. He had smiled and said he believed in giving us a head start in life. Cale used his money carefully. He put it into mutual funds and used some for a down payment on a condo. Our cousin Isolde tried to start a travel blog, but after a year, it stopped making money. And me? I put all of my money into new technology companies. I invested in blockchain systems and early artificial intelligence startups. May as well have set it on fire, Uncle Theron laughed. They did not know the truth. That $150,000 was not burned. It was the seed money for my company, Valen Nexus Capital. It was a private investment fund focused on new and growing technology. While they rolled their eyes at me, I worked day and night building something much bigger than they imagined. Still holding on to your little crypto coins? Cale teased. Hope they're worth more than a coffee gift card now. I quietly looked at my phone under the table. A message had just arrived. The final confirmation. Tomorrow morning, Valen Nexus Capital would become a public company on the New York Stock Exchange. The company was now worth billions of dollars. It's doing fine, I said softly. Actually, I've been meaning to tell you about Nexus. Did I mention my new office? Cale interrupted quickly. Corner office. Amazing skyline view. It's everything I worked for. Uncle Theron raised his glass. That's how you grow real wealth. Responsible choices. Patience. My phone buzzed again. A message from my CFO. Bloomberg wants your quote for tomorrow morning. Big media attention expected. Aunt Seraphine leaned closer to me. Selara, dear, maybe Cale could help you manage whatever money you have left, so you don't lose the rest. I almost laughed, but I held it in. Cale managed about $70 million in client funds. Just last month, my firm had finalized a $300 million investment in a powerful new cybersecurity company. Thank you, I said kindly. But I think I'll stay with my team. Cale shrugged. If you say so. And I did say so. Because tomorrow morning, everything would change. The headlines would tell the story. The whole family would finally know what I had done with Grandpa's money. Last I heard, Cale continued, you were working in that tiny co-working space downtown, playing with digital coins. That small office had only been temporary. Our real headquarters was almost finished. It was 51 floors tall in Midtown Manhattan, made of glass and steel, with Valen Nexus Capital glowing in bright blue letters at the top. About that, I started. But Uncle Theron jumped in. Your grandfather would be disappointed, he said with a heavy sigh. He wanted that money to give you a real future, not fund some tech dream. I thought about Grandpa Alaric. He made his own fortune by investing in computer companies long before most people believed in computers. A few weeks before he passed away, he had told me, the future rewards the bold. Be first. Be right. Be patient. Actually, I said calmly, opening my laptop, I wanted to show you something. Oh, please, Aunt Seraphine groaned. Not another one of your blockchain videos. Cale, explain to her how proper investing works, Uncle Theron said. Cale puffed up proudly. Real value comes from diversification. You spread your money around. You pick strong companies. You focus on steady growth. You don't just throw money at trends. While he talked, my laptop loaded the pre-market trading screen. My eyes stayed on one line. WNX, Valen Nexus Capital IPO opens in 27 minutes. The demand was extremely high. The banks had already raised their price prediction. Soon, everyone at this table would know the truth. The girl they said wasted her inheritance had built one of the fastest-growing private funds in North America. But for now, I pushed my food around my plate and let them keep talking. Sometimes the best answer is silence. Sometimes the best revenge is not served at dinner. It rings in from Wall Street. The next morning, sunlight filled my real corner office overlooking Bryant Park. CNBC played on the big screen. The opening bell was only 30 minutes away. The news banner read, WNX expected to be the largest IPO of the year. My phone buzzed with a text from Cale. Breakfast at the club. Dad wants to talk about responsible investing again. Before I could answer, Ellis, my assistant, rushed in with wide eyes. It's live, she said. She held up her tablet. The Wall Street Journal headline read, Tech visionary Selara Valen to launch game-changing IPO. Do they know yet? She asked. They're about to, I said with a small smile. My phone rang. It was my mom. Selara, honey, she said gently. Can you come to breakfast? Your father is worried. He says it's not too late to make smarter choices. I looked down at the street. Reporters were gathering outside our building. Actually, Mom, I said, can you all meet me somewhere instead? Where? She asked. Turn on CNBC, I replied softly. Then I ended the call. My CFO walked in holding the newest numbers. Demand is breaking records, he said. We may open above $220 per share. I straightened my blazer and walked toward the elevator. My legal team stepped in, carrying the ceremonial bell. My phone buzzed again, and again with messages from the family group chat. Cale, why is Selara on CNBC? Aunt Seraphine, what is Valen Nexus Capital? Uncle Theron, is this some kind of mistake? I typed back 2 words, watch and see. Ellis turned up the television volume. The news anchor said, in what is being called the investment story of the year, Valen Nexus Capital goes public today. Founded by 32-year-old Selara Valen, the fund began with a $150,000 inheritance and now leads in frontier technology investing. My phone rang again. Cale. Selara, he said nervously. Tell me this is a different Valen fund. Remember that computer money you laughed at? I asked calmly. It just made me a billionaire. On TV, the anchor continued. With strong investments in blockchain systems, quantum computing, and next-generation AI, Valen Nexus has grown over 1,100% in 3 years. Another call came. Uncle Theron. Selara Evelyn Valen, he said loudly. What is going on? The inheritance you said I burned, I answered steadily. I turned it into a company worth billions. And the bell rings in 15 minutes. In the background, I could hear Aunt Seraphine crying softly. My CFO leaned closer. We just passed $3 billion in pre-market trading, he whispered. A few minutes later, the elevator doors opened again. There stood Uncle Theron, Aunt Seraphine, Cale, and the rest of the family. They were still wearing their country club clothes. They stepped into our giant glass atrium filled with LED screens, flashing numbers, reporters, and cameras. The Valen Nexus Capital logo shined brightly above the stage. I walked toward them. Welcome, I said gently. Would you like a tour before the bell rings? They looked around in shock. All this time, Cale said quietly, while we were laughing at you, you were building an empire. Aunt Seraphine wiped her eyes. Selara, why didn't you tell us? I looked at her kindly. Would you have listened? Or would you have reminded me again that Grandpa's money wasn't for dreams? Before she could answer, someone called out, We're live in 5 seconds with Selara Valen. Please take your seats, Ellis said politely, guiding them to the front row. They sat down, whispering to each other, still trying to understand. I took a deep breath and stepped toward the stage. Cameras pointed at me. The lights were bright. My heart beat fast, but I felt calm inside. Grandpa Alaric's words echoed in my mind. Be first. Be right. Be patient. I wrapped my hand around the ceremonial bell rope and smiled as the countdown began. 3, 2, 1. I rang the bell. The room filled with cheers and clapping. On the big screen, the numbers jumped higher and higher. Valen Nexus Capital was officially public. The price opened even higher than expected. In the front row, my family stared at the screen in amazement. And for the first time, they were not judging. They were finally listening. Cale leaned forward, his eyes wide and shiny, like he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Selara, those lessons I gave you about safe investing. Just relax. You were. I looked at him, picked up the little ceremonial bell on the desk, and whispered, "Save it. We're about to see who really understands the market." As the CNBC countdown started and the cameras turned on. 5 years. 5 whole years of being told I was reckless with money, being talked over at family dinners, and people saying my ideas were silly. Every single moment, every single night I stayed awake thinking about numbers, plans, and ideas which had led to this very moment. Suddenly, the trading floor below went crazy. People were shouting, running around, and punching buttons as Valen Nexus Capital, or WNX, jumped past $250 per share in just the first hour. It was like a storm of excitement, everyone moving fast, shouting numbers, making deals, and cheering. From the executive viewing suite, my family watched quietly. Their eyes were glued to the big wall of market screens that showed all the numbers jumping higher and higher. $265 per share, Cale muttered, staring at his phone, trying to calculate how much money this really was. That means your fund is worth more than the entire money of some small countries. I smiled and finished the thought for him, calmly sipping my espresso. Mom just stared at her untouched coffee cup, her hands trembling slightly as the TV replayed the bell-ringing ceremony over and over. My family looked confident and calm, watching me on the screen. It was strange. It wasn't the same niece they used to scold at family barbecues for taking risks with her ideas. Dad finally spoke. "Your grandfather, he knew, didn't he?" I turned to the window and smiled. Grandpa Alaric was my first advisor. That money he gave me when I was young wasn't just a gift. It was him saying, "I believe in you, Selara." He saw what I could do long before anyone else. He believed in me even when the rest of the world didn't. "But the crypto stuff, the weird tech companies," Cale said, voice full of disbelief. "I carefully researched everything and took smart risks," I said, turning back to face them. "While you were happy with 8% returns, I was locking in 1,000% gains from tiny tech startups, blockchain, neural networks, AI, and quantum cloud security. You called them fads. I called them the future." Just then, Ellis rushed in, slightly out of breath, holding an iPad and a notebook. "We just crossed $275 per share. Wall Street is loving it. We're trending on every financial network." Mom finally found her voice. "All those times we tried to talk sense into you, we thought you were throwing everything away." I looked at her gently. "No, Mom. I was just playing a different game. You followed the rules." I changed the board. The screen suddenly lit up with a red banner. Breaking. Selara Valen becomes one of the youngest self-made billionaires in U.S. history. "Millionaire," Cale whispered again, almost in shock. "My little cousin is a billionaire?" Dad stood up suddenly, walking to the glass wall that looked down at the trading floor. He placed his hand on the window and didn't turn around. "I was wrong," he said quietly, almost like he was talking to himself. "We all were about everything." "Yes," I said simply. "You were." Aunt Seraphine looked at me, her voice cracking. "But why keep this all from us? Why not tell the family what you were doing?" "Because I needed quiet," I replied. "I needed space to build without your doubts, without Cale's lectures, without feeling guilty for not doing it the safe way." Ellis returned, holding a clipboard and iPad. "Selara, Bloomberg wants the first interview, and the architects are here for the final look at the new headquarters. Do you have time?" I stood slowly, adjusting my blazer, trying to look calm even though my heart was racing. "Tell Bloomberg I'll meet them on the rooftop garden. Let's show them what belief looks like. And make sure the architects know I want a phoenix sculpture in the lobby." Dad turned to look at me, eyes shiny with tears. "A phoenix?" I smiled. "It feels right. Everyone thought I'd crash and burn, but I didn't. The phoenix rises from the ashes." "Show them to the conference room," I told Ellis. "I'll be there in a minute." "New headquarters?" Cale asked, trying to sound casual. 50 stories. Central Park views," I said with a small smile. That tiny office downtown was just a temporary workspace. Now we're going big. Dad turned from the window misty-eyed. "Your grandfather would be so proud." "He is proud," I said softly. "He believed in me before anyone else. He knew the biggest returns come from backing someone people underestimate." The screens flickered again. WNX was now $3,187 per share. The small inheritance Grandpa had given me which everyone thought was wasted, had grown into something no one could have imagined. Not even me on that first sleepless night 5 years ago when I wired the first investment. Cale tried to force a grin, thinking about all the advice he had given me years ago. I picked up my tablet and gave him a polite nod. Actually, I have back-to-back meetings with international partners today. But if you're serious, I swiped through documents. Valen Nexus is always hiring analysts. Entry level, of course. His smile faltered. The cousin who lectured me at every holiday dinner would now have to apply for a junior position at my company. I should get going, I said, slipping my tablet into my bag. Ellis will walk you out. I turned to Mom and Dad. Sunday dinner is at my place this week. You'll love the view from the penthouse. As I walked away, my heels clicked against the marble floor. I heard Mom whisper, "Our daughter a billionaire." "No," Dad said, his voice thick with emotion. "Our daughter a visionary." I smiled quietly as I reached the conference room. Ellis was already holding the door open. I thought of Grandpa Alaric's final words to me that crisp October afternoon when the leaves were falling outside his hospital window. Don't wait for them to understand. Show them what you see. Show them the future. Now, as I watched my family frozen in awe, staring at the screens flashing billions in real time, I realized I had shown them more than just wealth or money. Sometimes the best investment isn't in stocks, houses, or mutual funds. It's in believing in yourself, in something no one else sees, even when the world calls you foolish, even when your own family doubts you. And sometimes that quiet, steady belief can give more than money ever could. I didn't build Valen Nexus Capital to prove anything to anyone. At least, not at first. I built it because I believed in something no one else did, not the market, not the media, and definitely not my family. But that belief, quiet and steady, was mine. And sometimes that's all it takes to do something amazing. I walked into the conference room, and the sunlight from the big windows made the room sparkle. I could see the city below, tiny cars and people moving around like little ants. I imagined all the new things we could build here, the teams we could hire, the inventions we could support. All of it started with a single idea and a belief that it could work, even when no one else did. The architects were waiting, their clipboards full of designs and drawings. They were ready to show me the new headquarters building, and I could see how excited they were. I smiled at them. Let's make this the most inspiring place in the world. I want every corner to remind people that anything is possible if you believe. Ellis set down my coffee and whispered, "Everyone's still talking about your numbers. The news networks can't stop covering you." I nodded, smiling quietly. Good. Let them see what happens when you follow your own path. And not just the path others expect you to follow. As I looked back at my family, still frozen in awe at the numbers on the screens, I felt proud, not of the money, not of the fame, but of the journey. The late nights, the sleepless weekends, the moments when I doubted myself but kept going anyway. Those were the real investments, the real lessons. And now, 5 years later, the quiet belief that started it all had grown into something beyond imagination. A company, a legacy, a chance to show the world that sometimes being called foolish isn't a bad thing. It's just the first step toward being brilliant. I straightened my blazer, took a deep breath, and turned to the architects. Let's build something the world will remember. A place that shows what belief looks like in real life. And in that moment, I knew that the real value wasn't in the numbers on the screens. It was in the courage, the patience, and the vision to see the future before anyone else did. That was the greatest return of all.